Hey everyone, Mark Holloway, CEO of Meridian Medical Staffing. Today I'm super excited because I've got Joe Conte, who is with Travel Nurse Tax. Joe and I met each other about a year ago, and we've been talking and just kind of, Joe and I pick each other's brains about travel nursing tax in general. And I want to introduce Joe and have him tell you a little bit about what he does and how he got into specifically travel nurse taxing. So here's Joe. Go ahead, take it away.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm the owner of TravelNurseTax.com. I'm a CPA. As you can see, we focus on tax prep for travel nurses. Sort of a niche in the industry. And the way I got started was my wife is a travel nurse out of college. She went to FSU Nursing School and began her career as a traveler. And a very close friend of mine as well at the time started off as a traveler. And I was working for the big accounting firms, KPMG, Arthur Andersen back then, and each of them told me there's just a need for some help in the travel nurse tax field. So that's kind of how the process got started. And here we are 20 years later.
So I'm going to start in just asking you just some general questions that I get a lot. And again, now that tax season is over for a lot of people, I just think it'd be a good time to start to introduce people into really travel nurse taxing and all the different things they see out there. Nurses are very, very bright, very smart people. They understand medical, but when it comes to taxes, as you probably can speak really intelligently about, oftentimes they're that's not what their expertise is at. So I get a lot of questions. I'm not a CPA, so I can't give tax advice. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of get you some questions that I get a lot. Maybe you can answer some questions without people having to, pick up the phone and call us all the time. So let's start with a basic. One of the things I hear about is, someone says, "Hey, listen, I live in Iowa and I'm on an assignment in New Mexico. Why is it that I have to take taxes out of New Mexico? Can't I just take taxes out of? Can I just be taxed in Iowa because I'm not going to live in New Mexico forever. I'm only there for 13 weeks."
Right. Yeah, that's a very common question that comes up basically with almost every traveler we work with. The answer is you pay tax where you work. So if you're in New Mexico, you're going to pay income tax on the income you earn while you're in New Mexico. If you're an Iowa resident and a New Mexico non-resident, you are eligible for a credit back to Iowa for those taxes. So and that's an important concept that's often missed by travelers and by other tax preparers.
So talk to me about that. Kind of walk the folks out there watching through that. So I'm on assignment. I'm in New Mexico. And every week, my company is taking New Mexico taxes out. How does that? And I am an Iowa resident. I'm going to file my taxes in the state of Iowa. How does that work? Where I pay all this money to New Mexico. So what happens with Iowa? How does that work at the end of the year?
Right. So Iowa is going to see your entire income for the year. So let's just say you made $50,000 for the year, for the entire year. Iowa is going to see that you earn $50,000 and tax you on all $50,000. If you worked in New Mexico and made $20,000 of that in New Mexico, you would then be eligible for a credit for the taxes you pay to New Mexico on that income. So, a good rule of thumb is if you owe a bunch of money to your home state, you might have messed up on your taxes. You may not have applied for those credits properly, and we see that often.
Okay, so that's pretty common then, and obviously that's up to a nurse to make sure that when they're sitting down with their CPA that they're asking these questions and they have somebody that understands how that really works, right?
Absolutely.
Gotcha. So can we talk about this term that I hear a lot called, is that what people are talking about when they say, what's your tax home?
Right. So yeah, this is another key, tax issue here with travelers. So your tax home is very often the same as your permanent residence. For most people, in fact, it is the same thing. For travelers, it may not be. Your tax home is basically, the city or the geographical area where you work and spend, the majority of your time working and earning income. Your economic home base, essentially. It could be different from your permanent tax home, which is basically where you have a family home and a residence.
Right. So it's where you pay your taxes. It's the state in which you claim as your state that you reside in, right?
Correct. Most of us are the same thing.
I hear this tax home. I'm like, well, can't they just say the state that you live in and you pay your taxes in? But that's a new term. So if I backtrack a little bit, I get this a lot, and I thought, just to kind of have you confirm this. Nurses sometimes don't understand that we don't have a choice as a company. We have to, in this example we're talking about, I have to make sure that New Mexico is given their payroll taxes because that is in fact where the wage is earned. And I get people saying, well, can you just pretend I'm still in Iowa? And the answer is legally, no, I can't. And it's the reason why, because we can't, because Iowa can't get that money. They haven't earned it. New Mexico has to get that money because that's in fact where the wage is taking place. So for that reason, nurses have to understand that we can't just arbitrarily go, okay, we're not going to take care of New Mexico. We're gonna be wrong and falsify and actually claim in Iowa. That's completely wrong, and that's the bottom line why we can't just arbitrarily say we'll just take taxes out in Iowa.
Correct. That's in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay. So I did that well. See, I got a future here. I got to go back to school.
You're learning.
All right. So another question I have for you, and this is a real common one, and that is that we look at a lot of offers, and a lot of nurses will be willing to share other companies' offers with us. And sometimes I look at these offers and I'm going, wow, this is really crazy that this company is offering almost what seems like just an arbitrary amount, but a huge amount, 2/3, over 50% to 2/3 of the income tax free. And a lot of nurses ask me, what should I do when a company offers me? I mean, how and why do they do that? But first of all, what do I do if a company offers me something that's crazy amount of money tax free?
Right. Yeah, this is a big issue here. So first of all, the wage a professional nurse earns is not arbitrary. There's a market for that. There's a value in that, and the IRS sees that as well. So if an arbitrarily low wage is being paid, that's a problem for the agency, but also for the individual nurse, to deal with. They could be hit with tax penalties and other issues that they don't want to deal with. So that's one thing. The other thing is the per diem portion of that is dictated by the GSA. So there's allowable amounts up to a certain amount can be paid as a reimbursement or a tax-free per diem. So you're talking about two things. They're separate. There's a wage, which is taxable, and then there's the per diem, which is non-taxable. Right. And the circumstances will dictate these amounts based on the market.
So when a nurse sees something that looks erroneous or looks lopsided, can she go to her company and say, hey, how are you guys coming up with this figure where 2/3 of my hourly rate is tax free? I mean, what does a nurse do in that case? What would you recommend that they do?
Well, I recommend the nurse absolutely say something to the recruiter or the agency and say, is this a market value? Is this a standard rate? Or better yet, consult with the tax preparer, experienced tax person with regard to that.
So what you're basically saying is that if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And I guess the follow-up question of that, why would a company want to do that? What would be the reason a company would want to do that to a nurse?
Well, there's a lot in it for everybody here. The agencies, if they pay a lower taxable wage, they're paying a lower amount of tax as well. There's payroll taxes that they're no longer having to pay, which adds up to tens of thousands or more of dollars, depending on the size of the company. So it's a really simple reason as to why they would want to do that.
So what you're telling me is that, I make sure I get this right, companies actually want nurses to take low taxable wage because they're going to pay low payroll on that tax, right? So be really, really, really careful with a company that's trying to throw too much at you tax free.
Yes, the pitch there is the nurse also will pay lower tax, which is true. So it's a benefit on both sides from that perspective. But when it comes to your taxes, you don't want to be paid a wage that's lower than the market value for the service that a professional and experienced nurse provides. So there's a market value that should be adhered to.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
And most agencies are great with doing this, but there's always some out there that there's consistent issues with.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into a heavier topic. All right. I want to talk a little bit about these, what we call here at Meridian Medical Staffing, extra hours. And when I'm specifically talking about those nurses that work on 12-hour shifts, and the contracts that we're seeing very frequently are, here's $20 an hour, and I'll use this one because it works out mathematically. Here's $540 weekly tax-free, which if you divide 540 by 36 hours, that's $15. So this is basically $35 an hour hourly compensation, which sounds like a relatively okay, fair deal. What I'm seeing though is that the agencies are saying when you work a 37th hour, the only thing we can pay you is just that $20 an hour because of obviously a fixed sum figure. So my question, and by the way, this is kind of a little bit of a heavier topic. They're being told by these others, by agencies, that they can't increase that 540 because then that would be what's called wage recharacterization. But my question is, could an agency for that 37th hour pay a nurse $35 an hour taxable? Is that wage recharacterization?
Well, the answer to your question is absolutely. The agency can pay the nurse on hour 37 plus a different wage, a higher wage, and they can. Certainly. It's not wage recharacterization at all.
It's not. So again, the last time I saw, the government likes it when you make more money and they put you in a higher tax bracket and you pay more taxes, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Absolutely.
So this thing about saying we can't give you, I mean, what they're saying is true. They can't take 540 and make it $600 because that would in fact be wage recharacterization because it's about the tax-free dollars. Am I right?
Absolutely. You can't increase the per diem sort of arbitrarily if they work an extra hour, because that would be exactly basically the definition of recharacterizing, income. And you don't want to go there, but you can certainly pay an hourly wage that's higher.
Right. So that's not what they would consider that wage recharacterization at all. So
that's right.
With your business, and again, you work exclusively with travel nurses. Am I right?
Travel nurses, travel medical professionals across the board, doctors, nurses.
Oh, that's
techs,
right.
You name it.
Gotcha. Well, our audience is mostly travel nurses, but let's incorporate everybody. What's the number one? Let's talk about some of the number one mistakes or things that you think would help our audience today to really kind of know going into a relatively. I mean, we're already starting in the middle of the second quarter, but going into a new year, what's the biggest mistake you see travelers either make or with regard to their career as a travel nurse?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two here since you gave me this chance to answer the question. The first one relates back to the first question you asked with the states. Not applying properly for the state income tax credits that you're due. If you're an Iowa resident and you work outside of the state, you're eligible for, and you can receive credits for taxes paid to other states. That's a huge one that equates to dollars, significant dollars every year, and very often we see that travelers either miss that if they try to prepare taxes on their own, or if they go to one of those kind of walk-in tax shops that might not have tax prep experts that know this field. So that's the first. That's a big one. Yep. The second one would be regarding your tax home. Maintaining your tax home is a key to allow the traveler to continue to receive tax-free stipends. And I see often where the lines get blurred. The traveler might, not follow certain steps to keep the tax home in place, which could then lead to the per diems being taxed and cost you quite a bit of money. So those are the two.
Gotcha. So what you're basically saying is that now on this applying for tax credit, is that something they should do through a CPA? Is that something that they could do on their own? Is it something that has to be done in advance or before the year ends?
No, that's something that's done on the tax return. When you file your state tax returns, you apply for the credit within the tax forms. Each state has its own form to apply for those credits. And again, it's often missed for tax preparers that aren't experienced in preparing multi-state returns.
Right. I'll agree with that. I personally get calls from some of our travelers that make it into up to me during tax season. They're saying, "Hey, I'm sitting here at XYZ in the strip mall company, and I'm sitting here with this tax preparer, and they're confused about my two different states," which makes me scratch my head saying, how can somebody be preparing your taxes be confused about what you do? So I guess what I want to kind of go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a funny story. I get calls every year, this year included, from travelers. Sometimes they call me right from the chair at the walk-in shop. Hey, I thought I could do it on my own. I walked across the street here, and the tax preparer has some questions. Can you help?
Yeah.
So I will. I usually will help at that moment in time because I don't want the traveler getting stuck, and sometimes they've already paid, and I don't want them paying twice. So I get calls from those shops, every year, a couple of them, and so it's interesting, but it happens.
Well, and you mean I know you're a kind of guy that wouldn't say this, but I'm going to say this to our audience. When you're traveling, go out and get a CPA, somebody that understands not only taxes but travel taxes, and if they can find someone like you and Travel Nurse Tax that truly is dedicated to travel nursing, I mean, that makes all the sense in the world. And it's the same cost to them to go with you as it would be with any other CPA. You might be paying a couple more bucks, I think, than one of those walk-ins, but you won't say this, Joe, but I will. The benefit and the peace of mind that you're going to get from not only having a CPA, but having somebody who is a travel medical professional CPA, to me is almost a no-brainer. So there's my plug.
I'll happen to agree with you on that. I've been doing this for quite a while, and as I said, my wife is a traveler. I kind of been doing this forever. I saw it firsthand how the travel experience impacts your tax returns. So yeah, I would absolutely agree with you on that.
Yeah, having somebody that understands what it's like to have a 13-week assignment or whatever you have with the doctors, shorter assignments and go from state to state is it's. And I would set that up early. I mean, I know that you just got done with tax season, but I certainly would recommend interviewers giving you a call to kind of, at least talk about the upcoming
year. Yeah, I spend most of the rest of this year, working with travelers. I call with questions, helping, give advice, and kind of getting them situated for upcoming tax season. I also will mention that the fee is probably the same as H&R Block or the other shops. Very, very similar, if not sometimes lower. So it's right there and very competitive with those companies.
That's perfect. Well, I really appreciate your time today. I'm almost guaranteed that I'm going to get some recommendations to talk to you again. So hopefully,
right.
We'll do during this summer here. We'll have another opportunity. I'll field some more questions that some people had, and if you've got time, we'll ring you out again. But I really appreciate everyone for watching this. Hopefully, we answered some just 36,000-foot fundamental questions about travel nurse tax and how to apply that as a traveling medical professional. So, Joe, I appreciate your time today, and we'll talk to you hopefully again real soon.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Talk to you in a bit.
All right. Take care.